What's up, everybody? This is Chris Sarabri with another edition of the Car Concierge Show, the show that helps with the buying, selling, maintaining, and repairing of your vehicle. On today's show, we're going to talk about some mandatory anti-drinking and driving tech that they're going to be putting into these cars coming up here in the future. We're also going to talk about an ICE raid that happened on a highway over in Oklahoma that netted over 90, maybe 100 people who were illegal immigrants who were driving semi-trucks and cargo trucks illegally. And last but not least, we're going to talk about a news story that came out talking about the fact that the average car prices reached upwards of $50K and how that's sitting with the average American consumer. All right, let's jump straight into it. First off, we're going to talk about the latest in anti-drinking and driving tech. And of course, if you a regular at all of this show, that you know that I'm a big advocate of not drinking and driving. It's one of the worst things that you can do. One of the things that causes a lot of the major accidents that we see on our highways and roads today. So really not a big fan of it. But they're coming out with some new tech that they're pretty much going to force you to put in your vehicles to keep you from being one of those drinking and driving people. Let's check it out.
Topic. I don't think anybody should really debate the fact that doing so is irresponsible. But what warrants a drunk driver? How much alcohol do you have to consume to be dangerous behind the wheel? A few years ago, I went to Romania on holiday with a friend and we rented a car to drive around. I was the only one of the two of us that was able to drive a car, and I found out that the legal tolerance for drink driving in Romania is 0%. If you have one drop of alcohol in you when you are behind the wheel of a motor vehicle, the police can and will arrest you for that. So, needless to say, I didn't push the boat out on that. However, depending on your size, depending on how well you are when it comes to consuming alcohol, when it comes to the ABV percentages, here in the UK, you could probably get away with 2 pints of beer or something like that. Again, depending on your size. If you're a 6-foot man like me, you could probably get away with that. However, if you're a 5-foot nothing woman, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe stick to one. So that's very much a controversial topic. And when it comes to the car companies as well, they are also looking at technology that can stop people from drunk driving. Now, in my car, personally, I have something that basically it monitors how you drive, and it actually does alert you to being potentially tired. If you are steering in a certain way, if you're making mistakes when it comes to being on the edge of lanes and stuff like that, the car will actually say to you, you're tired, you need to take a break. And I will freely admit to the fact that it has alerted me sometimes to being very tired behind the wheel. And yeah, I was pretty tired, to be honest. I very much needed a rest at that point, but I also really needed to get home. Thankfully nothing happened in the end, but this technology is very much coming in. You know, we're going to get self-driving cars eventually too, which will just remove the whole drunk driving thing. I mean, you could down a whole bottle of wine, I suppose, and be, taken back to your house by your car at that point. I suppose that's okay, really, although I wouldn't recommend going for an entire bottle of wine on a night out. Each their own though, of course. But yeah, interesting, because General Motors in the United States, they are looking at a potential solution to this, stopping people from drink driving behind the wheel. But how are they going to do it? Let's have a look how. Full story here on the channel as always, guys. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, has, after years of voicing its intent, officially submitted an advance notice of proposed rulemaking surrounding anti-drunk driving technology in vehicles. This marks the first formal salvo in its bid to ensure every new vehicle sold in America comes with some sort of built-in inebriation detection and possibly an interlock that prevents the car from being driven if the driver is determined to be impaired. I believe there are some measures out there, I think it's in some states in the US, where you actually have to use a breathalyzer to use a car if you have been, caught severely drunk driving, if you've had like your license took off of you for a year or whatever, and after that you have to have a breathalyzer in your car, and to drive it you need to use it. I believe that's the thing. I don't think it actually stops you from driving the car without using one, but it's another deterrent for people from doing that.
It does standardly stop you from starting a car in those situations. I've dealt with those a lot in my work, because I'm not much of a drinking and driving guy. Of course, once again, I hate that, and I'm not um, one that believes that you should get behind the wheel of a car if you've drunk anything at all. But I have family members that have had, those systems in their car that they had to breathe into before they are allowed to start the car. Several cases, actually. Even the case right now that I have a family member who is trying to get the interlock system put in their car, but he can't do it because he doesn't have a driver's license. And it's crazy because he just bought this car. So we're going to have a conversation eventually about how people are still able to buy vehicles when they don't even have driver's license. But right now we're talking about this interlock system, and it's one of those systems that is very necessary if you're one of those people that are just, because drinking is one of those things that, it's an addiction, and people have to fight this addiction as well at the same time, having to get to work and get around and drive vehicles to some degree. So that's why I really honestly do not have a problem with they talking about these type of systems being put in these vehicles, and having a situation where most people are, to some degree forced to establish that they're not been drinking and driving before they take off in vehicles. I don't mind it because it's not going to be a problem for me. I'm not going to run into any situations where I'm going to get in a vehicle and I'm going to be any shape or form being drinking to that degree. But it's just one of those things where people drink a lot. There's a lot of drinkers, people drinking all the time, morning, noon, and night. And do you really understand or know how much you've been drinking if you are even a slightest bit inebriated to the point where you cause the slightest bit of a problem when you're driving, accident, and it being a fatal accident. So I'm really not going to sit here and say I have a problem with them putting steadfast mandatory systems in these vehicles that have stopped people from drinking, because it's a problem. It's a major problem. It's caused a major amount of deaths when it comes to the automotive industry.
Anyway, let's move on. Let's have a look at this. Alcohol-related crashes are among the leading causes of injury and death on America's roadways, where standards have very much slipped when it comes to safety in this regard in recent years. After decades of progress reducing roadway deaths, America has seen car-related fatalities soar, leaving policymakers stumped and scrambling for solutions. Blame for the general increase in traffic casualties has been thrown around, with some speculating the ubiquity of smartphones and their reckless use by drivers while behind the wheel, increases in speeding and reckless driving during the pandemic when traffic was generally lighter due to lockdown measures that stuck around even as people returned to commuting, and the ever-growing size of the average American car being even bigger, as more people than ever are buying SUVs and trucks. But driver impairment by way of alcohol is easier to quantify, as policymakers can look to sobriety test data from traffic stops and post-crash investigations. In 2021 alone, drunk driving was responsible for over 13,000 deaths in the United States, which is a significant chunk of the 42,000 in total for any reason that year. If you do the maths, that's around a third. We might not fully grasp why the overall death total stays stubbornly high, but the NHTSA can see those 13,000 alcohol fatalities as avoidable, and they are. So yeah, there we go. The regulations around this could well change very soon. Could we see breathalyzers in all vehicles? I seriously doubt that. I think what's more likely to happen, particularly of course with self-driving cars coming in as well, I do think that there is going to be something that can monitor and detect when you are drunk. And I don't know how it will do that. I don't know how it will differentiate between being drunk and being tired. I don't know. That's something for the advanced tech to figure out. But I wouldn't rule out something like some sort of camera in the car or something like that that actually like looks at you and can tell if you're like, I don't know, with your pupils or whatever. I have no idea, right? And of course, I'm not advocating for this. I do think that would very much be an invasion of privacy. But as we cover many, many times here on the channel, guys, privacy is very much invaded anyway, so it wouldn't surprise me at all to see these measures being put in place and the politicians to lap it up and think that they are making real progress here, when in reality your freedoms are very much being trodden on, to say the very least. But Guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. What has to change when it comes to drink drivers? Should anything change? I think given these stats, something should be done, but it's a very difficult thing to do because why do people drunk drive? Is it because they're idiots? It's because they think they're above the law? Is it because they just made a simple mistake? You know, there's all kinds of reasons for it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying people have got all kinds of reasons. But yeah, like, share, comment, subscribe, guys. If you want to see more like this, have a fantastic day wherever you are in the world today.
All right, so yeah, I totally agree with him. To some degree, it will be an invasion of privacy, depending on how the system is created. If it's one of those things where you just engage with it to, inform the vehicle that you've not been drinking, then I don't see that being very much of an invasion. If it is a situation where there's going to be a camera installed in the vehicle to the point where it's looking at you directly and it's measuring your pupil size and all these other things, all this other technology to gauge if you're been drinking or not, which is of course going to be fallible to some degree. If it's not basing off your alcohol levels in your body, so it definitely could be very intrusive, very it could definitely be a situation where it could be intruding with your freedoms to some degree. I can agree with that. But overall, I would say that, to try your best to prevent 1/3 of the deaths that are happening on our roadways would be, a good idea and definitely worth some degree of, access to our drive rights, because you have to pretty much earn the right to drive, and we just want our roads to be safe. So if this technology, whatever it is, if they try their best to make it as less intrusive as possible, but still determine to some degree that you have or have not been driving, I don't see a problem with that. But of course, it could get very murky if you can go down that line where you're talking about, if people have the right to drive if they've just been drinking slightly. You know what I mean? All right, let's keep going. So next up, we're going to talk about the situation where, and we've been talking about this a lot about this lately, whereas, our roadways and highways are not truly safe if we have, people who are driving our semi trucks and all these tractor trailers and things of that nature, and they're not really supposed to be driving those vehicles on our highways and roadways. Specifically, illegal immigrants that cannot read the signs, have not went through the proper testing and learning process of being able to be on these roads. So there was recently, a couple days ago, a arrest and set up ICE arrest set over on the Oklahoma highway, and they caught upwards of 90 CDL drivers that were illegal immigrants and pretty much shouldn't have been on our roads. Let's check that out.
Oklahoma Highway Patrol says that it arrested over 100 people this week in a 4-day operation with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. The operation was focused on a stretch of Interstate 40 near the state's border with Texas. Troopers say that they arrested a total of 120 people suspected of being illegal immigrants. Troopers say most were driving large commercial vehicles without proper documentation at a port entry into western Oklahoma.
Every commercial motor vehicle that enters into the state has to stop at that port of entry. Nearly 25% of the people that we came into contact with were not here legally.
The Highway Patrol says that ICE agents transported any undocumented people to holding facilities in Oklahoma and Texas.
Wow. I mean, and it's crazy that, we keep talking about this and keep on harping over this. The simple fact, and it's not about the illegal immigrants themselves. It's about how they're coming across with the licensing, the vehicles, the ability to be driving on highways themselves. How do we get to that point? That's going to be the true question on how these people are coming across, these, their CDLs, getting the trucks. That is the real question for me. If I understand that and we've done a couple stories about this, and I understand that there's been a lot of situations where a lot of Americans, of course, have created massive loopholes. A lot of Americans have created massive loopholes that allow these illegal immigrants to get their CDLs and licenses, and of course, in situations that are illegal, particularly, the situation over in Kentucky where they were sliding the people $200 under the table so these people could get their CDLs to drive semi trucks and such. And it's just a massive problem. It's a problem because the safety of our highways, people who haven't been tested correctly, who haven't went through the correct process of getting their CDLs or their paperwork to be driving these vehicles. And also these people are not being able to read the signs correctly and to drive on the roads correctly because they don't understand the process. And this is a massive problem. It can create a massive problem on our highways, and we've seen it. We've covered over 3 or 4 situations where illegal immigrants that are driving semi trucks, cause massive accidents that cause injury and death to certain people. And not only that, we're talking about a situation where these people are, to some degree, taking jobs from American people. There was a massive boom in the trucking industry for quite some time, and people were making massive amounts of money from the trucking industry. And then, of course, the massive immigration situation began to happen, and what you noticed was that all those people that are making all of this massive amounts of money being truck drivers and semi-truck drivers, they did stop making all this money. And why is that? Of course, it's because the roads had been flooded with semi-truck drivers, and a good percentage of those were illegal immigrants that have come over to this country. So that took a lot of opportunity from the people who are here, who are doing this semi-truck driving, and it, pretty much leveled out the playing field and lowered the money for those people. So they're not making as much money, and a lot of people had to get out of the trucking industry because of that. So, it's one of those things where, with ICE and all the crackdowns on immigration, all these things, there's a lot of plus from that situation for the American people, specifically for truck drivers, because of course when this happens, of course you're going to take over 100 CDL drivers, semi-truck drivers off of the roads. That's 100 jobs for American people that they can jump back into trucking and make some decent money. So that's all it is. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say that it's a problem with the immigrants themselves. Now, mind you, of course, they're doing something illegal, and they know they're doing something illegal. So that is why you don't really have a certain amount of, care about them getting caught, because all in all, they knew that they were doing something illegal. And if you did it the right way, then no one would have a problem and you wouldn't be in this type of situation. All right, so last but not least, we're going to talk about the raise in prices on these vehicles. The average car price has reached over $50,000, and it's going to create a massive problem for the American people. Let's check it out.
Car prices are setting a new record. A new report shows the average price for a new car is more than $50,000 for the first time ever. Economists say it's one of many signs of a K-shaped economy, meaning different parts of the economy are recovering at different rates. Current data shows that the wealthiest Americans are spending, but for everyone else, basic needs are becoming increasingly hard to afford. Bankrate financial analyst Stephen Cates is here to break that all down for us. Hi, Stephen. Thanks for coming back. So what are some examples of where you're seeing evidence of a K-shaped economy right now?
Well, a lot of places, just the story you did on Broadway is a good example of that. High ticket prices are indicative of people who have the ability to spend going right ahead and spending it. Another example is Delta Airlines just reported they expect more revenue coming from first class and premium cabins than they do from the rest of the airplane. Frankly, just people who have the means are spending, and those who are feeling more squeezed, they're staying home.
You say spending by the top 25% of earners are doing much of the heavy lifting for the economy. How so, and what does that mean for everyone else?
Well, what it means is that those who are feeling like they have, a good amount of income coming in, or they feel wealthier due to the fact that they have a lot of investable wealth. A lot of that may be, growing quickly over the past few years. The market has been up. We have high interest rates, which are giving savings accounts a nice boost. Those people who have wealth and income, they are feeling very comfortable to spend. And those people who may not have the same high levels of income or same high levels of wealth, they're feeling more squeezed by inflation and rising prices and just uncertainty within the economy. That's making them have to look more closely at their budgets and try to figure out how are they going to cover these expenses that seem like they're getting out of hand.
But more people are also buying higher end vehicles. That's a sign of confidence, no?
Well, I think that the portion of people who are buying those higher end vehicles, a lot of that may be electric vehicles, which generally have a higher sticker price, larger SUVs, luxury vehicles. Those are a bigger share of what is being sold today. We're seeing that lower end cars, less expensive cars, they are making up a much smaller share of what's being currently sold. And the people who are buying those lower end cars, those lower cost cars, are the more average consumer. And so just the fact that sales are being shifted again towards more luxury and higher end vehicles is similar to this situation we're seeing just about everywhere in the economy, that high end experiences, high end items, they're selling like hotcakes, and everyone else, the lower end or replacement items, they're not.
The price gap between old and new cars is pretty narrow right now. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells us that, again, there's really a tough choice for people who are looking for options. Even flexible buyers who are open to new or used cars are finding that costs are pretty similar. When I looked up the cost of a 2021 Nissan Sentra versus a brand new one, the cost difference is roughly $1,000. So you could buy a brand new car for just a little bit more than you might buy a 4-year-old certified pre-owned car. So what is the better value? That is not clear. And when you have to take on debt to buy either one, you want to make sure that the car you buy is going to last and going to work for you for a number of years. Is the choice between a new and a used car any easier when the costs are basically the same? I don't think it is. And that puts people in a pickle.
All right, Bankrate financial analyst Stephen Cates, we appreciate it. Stephen, thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where, and I agree. It's just inflation has really destroyed the automotive industry, and it's a situation where, if you're the average person, even buying a car, no matter what, new or used, you're gonna be in a bad situation. These cars are extremely overpriced nowadays. The automakers were pretty much forced to overprice these vehicles because they have to compete, and of course they have to cover their bottom line. And with all of the latest technology and the cost for all of the new things that they're putting in these vehicles are not going to be cheap in any way, shape, or form. That's why a lot of people are still looking for those vehicles that are going to be cheap. They have that T truck that's supposed to be the EV truck that's supposed to be $30,000. People are really waiting for that, but I don't expect that to make a big boom here in the United States. And like they said, you're running into a situation where even used cars are highly priced. And used cars are highly priced because those people who are selling used cars understand that the new cars are at a extreme price as well. And they know that, just to save a couple $1,000s, people will come for a used car instead of going new. I would always say that if you're buying a vehicle, I want to say that you want to buy sort of new. I always tell people not to buy the same year that a vehicle came out. That's just redundant, because with recalls and everything like that, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be back and forth to the dealership, getting the vehicle checked out and recalls taken care of and all those things. So I am a very, very massive advocate of buying used cars. not massively used cars. I'm like the gentleman, instead of buying a 2025 Nissan Sentra, I would probably choose a 2021 or 2022 Nissan Sentra. But he's like he said, if you were to make that decision, you'd only be, making a price difference of probably like $1,000, maybe $1,500, which is not a lot of money, to save if you're buying a used car. And the whole point of buying a used car in most cases is to save money. And that's a big reason I did get into the used car industry. I saw a massive problem with the pricing of vehicles and a massive problem with the prices of used vehicles. So it's always a situation where for my company, we want to find a very nice used car at a good price, make sure that it is a very manageable, usable car, and then, with the amount of, upkeep that we have to take, get very small profit on the sale of the vehicle so that the person who's buying the vehicle can get a good car at a good price. And that's just not happening in the world we live in today. It's not a situation where people can get a good car at a good price anymore. It's very difficult, no matter if you go for a used car or a new car, because the prices have skyrocketed. The vehicles have so much technology and so many things happening with them that it's really hard to keep the prices low. And the automakers definitely have to compete with the other automakers with all of the technology that they put in their vehicles, so the prices are not going to drop. And it's going to be a situation where people are just going to keep the cars they have. They're going to stop going and buying new vehicles unless you're, in the top 10, 20% who have money or feel like your money is going to be long and strong, and you're going to continue to buy cars. But a person that has a $1,000, $1,500 a month, car bill is going to suffer a lot more than a person who's already paid for their car fully. And that's, if you have that ability, that's the way to go. I'm always an advocate of, if you have the money to buy cars outright, that's pretty much what I've done my entire life, is just save up the amount of money that I want to spend on a car, search for the car that I want to buy, and then buy it outright. That way I don't have a monthly bill, and all of the extra problems that they have are on me. But of course, like I said, I've always bought used cars. I had that one situation where I tried to buy the brand new Trailblazer, and it didn't work out for me. So ever since then, used cars, straight cash, it's just the best way to buy cars for me. So what we're truly saying is that it's going to be hard to buy cars in this day and age, my friends. The prices, $50K on average for anything, is a lot of money. And no matter who you are and where you work, if you're spending that kind of money on a car, it's going to put a nice little dent in your pockets. So hope you guys are going out there chasing the bag if you're going to buy lots of new cars. All right, guys, I'm going to let y'all go and get up out of here. I am Chris Surratt. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Car Concierge Show. Please hit the like, share, subscribe button, and I'm out. Peace.